Welcome to Synthesize This. In this episode, I'm going to be making a pad sound on the Behringer Deepmind 12. The difference here is that I'm going to be creating a shimmer reverb effect. And if you've never heard a shimmer reverb, here's what it sounds like. Let's get started. Alright, so the first thing we do as usual is initialize a basic patch. So I hold program, hit compare, and then the other thing I want to do is make sure that what I see on the panel is what I'm hearing. So I'm going to hold program and hit write, which will revert to panel. And now we have this basic simple patch. And I'm just going to tweak my envelope and get something more basic going here with no release, high sustain. I'm going to turn off the square wave for now. Alright, so we have a clean palette now. So we're going to be emulating the shimmer reverb effect, which was done by Brian Eno and Daniel Lanois. And the basic gist is that you run your signal through the reverb, and then you feed the signal back through a pitch shifter, and you pitch shift it up an octave. And then that gets fed back into the reverb unit. And you want to have a really high decay on the reverb. And what this creates is that you get the kind of normal reverb sound, and then over time you get this feedback of a really high pitched sound, which creates this atmospheric, ambient, very like lush sheen. You get almost like a echo of your sound at a high frequency. And I'm sure you've heard shimmer reverbs because they're quite popular now, and like Eventide, even the Valhalla stuff has a shimmer plugin. So I'm going to keep my basic patch for now. Let's set up the shimmer reverb first, and then we'll kind of tweak the pad sound and massage it a little bit to make it more interesting. So right now I have a completely dry signal. And if I go to my effects section, you can see I have no effects running. So if you remember, I said we have a reverb unit, and then we have feedback, negative feedback that runs through a pitch shifter, which shifts the signal up an octave. So in order to achieve that, we have to select a routing which allows us feedback. So right now I have a fully serial routing scheme here, which will basically just route the 4 effect slots, one through the other serially. So I'm going to cycle these, and you have quite a few here to choose from with all kinds of different combinations, but the one we want is ones that involve feedback like this. And you have a couple of those here towards the end. So I'm going to pick this one. And as you can see, the signal goes from here, it goes through slot 3, and then it goes through slot 4, and then it feeds back, so it circles back, and then the feedback chain includes slot 1, then it goes through slot 2, and then it cycles back into slot 4, and that's where you get your kind of feedback loop, is that 1 and 2 are in the feedback chain, and 3 and 4 are in kind of the main chain. So we're going to ignore 1 and 3, and we're just going to focus on 4 and 2 here. So 4 is where my reverb will live. And then in the feedback chain, slot 2, I'm going to add a pitch shifter to pitch the signal up an octave. So here we have our 4 slots that we can choose from, and you can see they get highlighted as you scroll. So in slot 4, I'm just going to pick a chamber reverb, and you can hear what that sounds like now. Basic reverb sound. And then in slot 2, I'm going to pick this effect called dual pitch. And here it is. So now you can't really hear the effect, but the main thing we want to do is configure these two. The key parameters are high decay for the reverb and octave up for the dual pitch. So in order to edit the effects, we keep pushing this effect button, which will cycle through the effects that we can edit. So the first one here is dual pitch, and we have a bunch of parameters. The first of which is semitones. So I'm going to set both the pitches to 12 semitones, which is going to be an octave. And the second one as well, I'm going to make it 12 up. Then you can also fine tune it by sense. So this is not critical, but you can kind of massage these parameters a little bit to get something interesting. And I'm going to adjust the decay to about 100. I'm going to make sure that both pitch shifters have roughly the same values, but slightly different to make it interesting. And I'm going to adjust the pan here to roughly 0 for both. Leave the mix to 100. High cut is fine. And then moving on to the reverb effect, the key thing here is to set a high decay. So I'm going to start it off at maybe 24, 22 seconds, and then we can tweak it around to get the kind of sound we want. So the other settings you can basically play around. They're not super critical for this sound, but you can play around and see if you find something interesting. So now if I go back to my main parameter here, the last thing I want to adjust is the level of the pitch shifter here. And that'll determine kind of our feedback gain. So I'm going to set this to maybe about, I don't know, let's say 80 for now. So now if I play a sound, so as you can hear, this is that classic shimmer sound where you get that high pitch kind of squeal that happens on top of what I was playing. And you can kind of massage this effect by adjusting the decay time and playing around with the level here. So now that I have a general ballpark for my effect, I'm going to quickly tweak my sound into more of a pad sound and add a little more atmosphere, make it a little more interesting. So the main thing you want with pad sounds is basically to shape your envelope with relatively high attack, high release. And I'm going to shape both my VCF and VC envelopes. Going to make sure that my envelope contribution to the cutoff frequency is set a little higher and bring down the filter. This way the filter opens gradually as I hold down the keys. And then we get this really lush, big pad sounds. Another thing I'd like to do is add a little oscillator drift. So in this unison or poly section, if I hit edit, I get this menu here. And one of the options is oscillator drift. So I can bring that up a little bit. And that'll cause the oscillators to kind of vary slightly in pitch to emulate more of an analog oscillator being tuned or detuned. The other thing I'm going to do is add a little bit of keyboard CV control for the cutoff frequency so that the higher up I play in the range, the more the cutoff frequency will be higher, so it'll open up the filter. And this more naturally emulates how most instruments behave. Is normally in the higher ranges you have a brighter sound, and in the lower ranges it's more muffled. I'm going to engage the square wave for oscillator 1, and I'm going to add a bit of pulse width modulation with one of the LFOs. So I'm going to go in, I'm in my mod matrix right now, and I'm going to pick LFO as my source and pulse width modulation depth as my destination, and bring up the amount. I'm going to pick a sine wave. And bring the frequency down so it's not too obvious. And now we can bring up oscillator 2 as well. So oscillator 2 has this tone mod, which kind of shapes the width of the wave and kind of creates these interesting timbre shifts. So what I'm going to do is assign LFO2 to modulate this tone mod. So again, back to my mod matrix, source LFO2, and destination, I'm going to pick this tone mod depth and bring up the value. Again, I'm going to pick a sine wave and lower the rate. And then the key thing of all of these things is to create really subtle amounts and lots of kind of micro shifts and modulations and timbre just to keep the sound interesting. So especially with pads, as you typically hold the notes for a long period of time, to keep it interesting, you want to have a lot of these little bits of tweaks and modulations happening. And the other thing I can do here is, what's interesting about this synth is that you can change the curve of the envelope at different stages. So if I select this curve option here, now these controls turn into curve settings. So you can see here how my attack, I can switch it from exponential to linear to kind of upwards exponential. And similarly for the release stage and for the decay stage as well. But in this case, it's irrelevant because I have my sustain all the way up. I'm going to bring up some noise as well and higher up my resonance. Another thing that could be interesting is assigning the mod sequencer to modulate the rates of the two LFOs. So let's see what that sounds like. So again, I'm going to go to my control sequencer here, set a clock division of 16th notes, turn it on, leave the length at 16, no swing, no slew rate, and I'm going to make it loop indefinitely. And I'm going to go here and quickly program a little sequence. And then I'm going to go to my ARP settings and adjust the tempo to something higher, like 78. So now that my sequencer is programmed, I can go to the mod matrix and select the sequencer here from the destination, or from the source, sorry. So I have control sequence, and then I'm going to assign LFO1 rate and bring it up. I'm going to go back and reduce the clock division to make it a little slower. And I'm going to assign the same control sequencer to the rate of LFO2 as well and bring up the amount. Which again gives us variations in timbre because it's changing the rate of the LFO2, which is changing the tone mod of oscillator 1. And instead of having a continuous sine wave as the LFO, now it's kind of speeding up and slowing down depending on the sequencer value. And that's about it. I'm going to leave it at that. It's a fairly simple pad sound, but I think the shimmer reverb really brings it to another level. And that's what I find in general with the Deepmind. I find that the effects section is almost a key part of the synthesis tools that you have here. So the effects are so good and so flexible that I don't think of them as things you add later to kind of enrich the sound. I almost feel it's part of the synthesis process here. So just like you would use a filter and oscillators, I treat the effects as an equal part in shaping the timbre. And yeah, leave it at that. If you want more videos like this, be sure to subscribe, because I try to make these Synthesize This videos almost weekly if I can. And in between those, I like to add tutorials and other videos and jams. So if you like synthesizers in general, subscribe. All right. See you guys in the next one.